So much, everyone, for coming today and sticking around for all the sessions. It's been wonderful to have you here. And I think we've had a fabulous set of conversations. It's a little hard to kind of take out one or two key points, given how wide-ranging many of these discussions were and the different topics we discussed. But I thought, Anant's going to follow me and maybe make more precise calls to action. But I thought it might be useful just to kind of summarize at least my takeaways for, where there are kind of really huge opportunities here and where I think it's exciting for many of us in the room to be going together in various ways. I think at the core of everything, and this, started out, the day started out perfectly with kind of Esther talk and her take on things, is that there are kind of these actually profitable opportunities that both raise profits and productivity for firms, for entrepreneurs, and also serve social goals. And this is low-hanging fruit. These are things which there isn't going to be the enormous resistance that we may find in some other areas of entrenched interests and such, since these are kind of win-win. And so it makes a lot of sense to, not only be looking at those, but certainly be pushing strongly in those areas. And some of those that kind of came up, obviously we had a lot of discussion this morning on upskilling, on soft skills training, both within the firm, but also outside the firm. Kind of the returns, the social returns to governments from doing these things are enormous if we kind of work out ways to do them effectively. And here's where kind of partnerships with JPAL, GBL, and all of us together in order to work out how to implement these things, how to scale them up, how to make them cost effective is kind of central. Another area which basically came through strongly, I think, in every session is just this kind of huge development in terms of digital record keeping, digital tools which are now being created. These are touching all of these areas. They're bringing kind of transparency to supply chains. They're allowing better decision making. They're also allowing workers, for example, to have more voice. And I think this is a hugely exciting area. And the other thing, from the perspective of generating impact and the perspective of developing kind of new solutions, these are also wonderful in they kind of lower the cost of testing out new ideas, because often in the background you already have a lot of data being collected, which allows you to quickly roll out new things, see how it's performing, kind of pull back if they're not working, push forward if they are. And so these are not only innovations in themselves, but also complements with many other types of innovation we may be thinking about. Kind of a third area that featured heavily in several of our discussions was gender issues, particularly related with female health, female empowerment. That has direct effects on productivity in firms, and obviously huge welfare impacts on the women themselves and their children, and intergenerational impacts through that. Female entrepreneurship is a kind of another area where boosting all of this untapped kind of capital, which struggles to grow more so potentially than male firms, is also a hugely kind of promising area here. Another area that we touched upon, which I think we'll see enormous amounts of progress, but also we have huge challenges ahead of us, is thinking about environmental sustainability, thinking about increasing efficiency in supply chains. I think some of our presentations today from the supply chain initiatives at MIT kind of made it clear there's a ton of low-hanging fruit. Why are these firms so excited about reducing their carbon footprint? Well, they're also saving a lot of cost when they're routing all their trucks in the right way, or combining shipments, etc. And so really these are another area which is kind of win-win, saving costs and helping the environment here. And no firm really likes to waste energy. Then kind of another area we touched upon, which again is hugely promising, is leveraging global value chains to raise labor standards and environmental sustainability. We unfortunately are in the emerging world, in the emerging economies, dealing with many countries that don't have the capacity to necessarily implement the rules that they would like, and the role of multinationals, often led by Western consumers who care deeply about these issues, in order to kind of help developing country governments implement the rules that they would like, seems hugely valuable. So, that's kind of just a kind of set of kind of opportunities which I think are present, and certainly JPAL's incredibly interested in pushing forward through our collaborations, as is GBL, and Anant will talk more about that as well. And what is the kind of particular kind of call to action here? It's often there are decision makers ultimately making these really transformative decisions, and it's trying to convince these decision makers the value of kind of evidence-based decision making. And it sounds like a no-brainer. Oh yeah, everyone should be doing evidence-based decision making, but it's really not how most decisions are made. And especially with all of this data that's coming online, and our ability now to design methodologies to rigorously evaluate things, we should be doing a lot more evidence-based decision making. And this involves kind of people in this room advocating for this to kind of people in their organizations, etc., in order to ensure more of that is being done. And that's, I think, relevant to private sector actors, to potential partners, NGOs working with private sector actors, to governments, to funders, etc. And so that would be kind of my takeaway. My call to action is we need more evidence-based decision-making in these type of areas, and these areas which are kind of crying out for it, and we are looking forward to helping to lead that charge along with Anant.
Thanks, David. I think actually your last kind of few remarks build up well to what I wanted to say. I think that when I and Utch first started kind of doing this work, even before GBL was founded, just as academics, me fresh out of the PhD without a good sense of what a research agenda would look like, I think we stumbled on this idea. We stumbled on an amazing partner, transformative partner in CIC that was interested in learning about solutions to its problems and leveraging, frontier methods to do those sorts of things. And to be honest, we thought we had, struck gold. We had just found the one firm that would really let us do these types of experiments and wanted to know the right answers. And don't get me wrong, CIC was a very unique opportunity, and certainly was, in the minority. But I thought that it would be really hard to find other firms to do that sort of thing. As we went forward, or even over just a few years, and in many other regions of the world and in many other industries, I was kind of surprised to find that, yes, while there are many firms that still need to be convinced on evidence-based decision-making for sure, but also on the willingness to experiment with the academics and so on solutions to their problems, it wasn't that hard to find at least a few large firms with the capacity to do this sort of thing, and with an interest in saying, look, we actually have stubborn problems. If you've got solutions, we're willing to try them. What I was kind of surprised by was that it was much harder at that time, and it's thankfully getting a little bit easier now, but to convince other members of the ecosystem that this was a worthwhile agenda. For example, it was very hard at that time to convince funders that experimentation in firms was something they should be funding, that it was actually a public good just like all of this other development work we were doing, and that, for example, it would not happen, or it would happen, at a very inefficiently small scale, if funders didn't encourage it, support it, prioritize it. It was also much harder to organize after that initial phase, once we kind of did get a little bit of evidence on some solutions that worked, and we were able to kind of generate them through a series of trials and so on, and with some of these firms that were willing to do those experimentation. It was really hard to organize resources around scale-up, even when we had evidence of rigorous evidence of impactful interventions, both for workers, and for firms. And And so, it has now taken a lot of time to kind of find the right government bodies who are interested in promoting these types of things focusing on this in their regulation, on these types of private sector innovations. Should we mandate the use of worker voice tools? And, should we use evidence to figure out what elements of those tools, need to be included when we do, endorse some or regulate some? The broader ecosystem we've heard about in terms of impact investing. It's one of these things that I think, to me sounded really pivotal to what we were going to try to do when we found these solutions and we wanted to proliferate them. And I still think that's true, but it became very hard to think, at that time, there were a lot of impact investments on kind of direct to consumer or direct to the developing world, poor types of solutions, and a lot less on like B2B solutions that would make more efficient firms in these areas or employers in these areas. It seemed like it wasn't as palatable. And even for multinationals, we had thankfully a lot of access to multinationals, brands in the apparel industry and buyers in other industries who do this type of work, who recognize their positions in these supply chains of being able to, wield a pretty heavy stick and say, look, this is the type of stuff we want to be involved with in our supply chain. But then, convincing them to use more evidence-based decision-making was a bit harder than I had expected. The suppliers were very interested in the evidence. For them, it was nuts and bolts. Tell me if this thing is gonna, reduce my worker turnover, great. But it took a little bit more to kind of encourage MNCs to kind of, have a different bar for what they were going to endorse, or whittle down what they wanted to focus on and prioritize what they should push. All of that is to say, it hasn't been all that long, but it has felt like a very long road to even this point in this room. This actually feels like a tremendous milestone. And I will say, just to have this diverse set of members of the ecosystem, the stature of each of you representing your own organizations, the breadth, really feels like a major inflection point. Even when David and I first kind of spoke about this idea, I think over a year ago, this idea that we should do this convening with these kind of disparate sets, I really didn't expect what I experienced today, of just how engaging the conversation was. Nobody is at a loss for a perspective on what to say here and really disparate perspectives that are all needed. And so I just want to say that, I think Atkin and I and now this very large team at GBL that we've assembled have kind of continued to tell ourselves that our mission is, or our vision in some sense, is to believe that we can change, the way that firms think about their workers in every corner of the world and in every industry, from thinking about them as consumable inputs or balance sheet liabilities to being much more assets like machinery that requires investment to maintain and investment to upgrade. And something that is part of the institution and part of the organization and actually establishes its value. But we can't do it alone. That much we've learned really the hard way. And so thank you all. I think I've tried to say it as much as I possibly could, personally to each and every one of you. I can't tell you how much I thank you for being willing to come here. We could not be more excited to collaborate with pretty much everyone in this room on this mission. But I just want to issue one more call to action, which is that I want to urge you all to make this the start of the conversation within each of your own organizations, within each of your own networks and orbits. We're going to need everyone in this room, and we're going to need a lot more people that are in your networks, that are either in your organizations or sometimes in collaborators that you have who have yet to come on board to the idea that this is maybe the priority for the next phase of development. So I'll just leave you with that to kind of take that call to action. I'll say one thing, which is that as part of a project we did on female labor force participation, kind of decentralized production, we developed these pen stands. We had a bunch of women in villages be producing these pen stands that are in the center of the room. We have one for each of you. There's a QR code there to scan to learn more about it. We have 10,000 of them. Please take one. So thank you again so much. And oh, yeah. You're absolutely right. And I'm so sorry that David had to tell me. Thank you to the organizing committee, every single one of you. I actually, it's very clear that I don't think David and I could have done any of what just happened here. And so, thank you to Rochuk and Rashi and Nick and Michael and absolutely everyone else for putting this together. It's been great.